Let's talk about colour. Not the B5 blue with a vibrant metallic fleck that covers most of this Dodge Challenger, nor the satin black of the optional satin black pack on this car. No, let's talk about a colour at the edge of the visible spectrum, the colour of blood and Mars and Shepherd's Delight, because this is the Challenger Hellcat Redeye.
Now, so what, you might be thinking, does that mean it's got conjunctivitis or it's just stepped off an overnight flight? No, what that means is it's got a slightly demonic bent to it, because it's got the engine from the Challenger Demon. What does that mean? Well, it means it's got a larger 2.7 litre twin-screw supercharger and new camshafts. It also means it's up to 797 brake horsepower.
Yes, the Demon had 808 brake horsepower, or 840 if you could find 100 octane fuel, but this has two smaller nostrils instead of one big one. And 797 brake horsepower, allied to 707 pounds-foot of torque, is, as we'll find out, plenty.
Now, there is another reason for red being important, and that's just in here. You see, with any Hellcat, you get two keys. If somebody hands you a black key, then I'm afraid that means you've only got 500 brake horsepower. The car recognises it and won't unleash any more. However, if you can get hold of the red key, then you've got the full whack. Red is pretty important in this car. Red starter button, red dials. So given that this car has got 797 brake horsepower, is it possible to drive it in any way sensibly? Yes it is actually. You have to certainly perhaps get a little more sensitivity into your right foot than you might be used to, particularly around town, otherwise you'll be laying down 11s away from every set of lights, which would be unfortunate, I think. But most of the time, yes, it's perfectly easy to drive, even if you don't knock it back to its 500 brake horsepower setting. In terms of suspension, it feels like a, well, very relaxed, sort of almost lazy sort of car. It's a big armchair of a car.
And this initially lugubrious demeanour makes it feel all the more extraordinary when you unleash its inner demon on a good piece of road.
For a start, the sound. I mean, it sounds like the sort of Ariel Atom's larger cousin, the one that's sort of spent a little too much time eating burgers, but there is a definite sort of connection with the supercharger scream from both, and both are equally entertaining orally to that extent. We've got an 8-speed auto, and the shifts are surprisingly snappy. In some ways, they can be almost too aggressive on the upshifts at times. And then there's that engine, which, I mean, it's got so much power. It's hilarious. It's like lighting the blue touch paper, and, well, you don't have to wait at all because it's just there, bang, every time. We've got 305 section tyres all round, so the sort of the grip map, as it were, is sort of a square, but because of all that power, because of all that torque, it means that the rears are made to feel like sort of 205 section, not 305 sections. Hellcat, you might or might not be interested to know, actually comes from a World War II fighter, the Grumman F6F Hellcat, which was a carrier-based fighter that took over from the Wildcat. Also, when Mopar said they were going to sell the Hellcat engine as a crate engine, it became, yes, the Hell Crate. That made me chuckle. Still does, clearly. The other big thing that you obviously notice with this car, and you might expect to hobble it, is the weight. I mean, it weighs over 2,000 kilos or 4,500 pounds. But because it wears its weight, it doesn't try to disguise it. As much as it wears its supercharger on its sleeve, it also lets you know from the outset that this is not trying to be a really light and lithe sports car. You have to work with that weight, you have to manage it, work with the roll, and I really like that. It's an honest car, it all matches, because it's not trying to be something it's not.
Although that hefty weight does mean you have to be a little judicious with the brakes when you're plunging downhill.
I really like this car. I think sometimes people think that Europeans don't necessarily get American cars, but absolutely, it's so much fun. The suspension is multi-link, and it does actually control the weight pretty well. We've got Bilstein dampers with 3 different modes on them. I've had a little fiddle with the modes down here, and to be honest, the best thing to do, certainly on the road, is just leave it in sport. You can turn the traction control to track if you really want to let loose, or obviously just turn it off. But sport does a very good job of giving you enough control, but not trying to tie the car down too much. And track tends to add, I think, a bit too much weight to the steering as well. Sport is spot on, really. What a fantastic piece of road this is as well. And it is really quite bumpy, so the suspension's having to work hard. And because it's got a bit of roll, because the suspension's not rock solid, when it does go over the limit, it sort of leans into it, and actually it's pretty progressive and gives you plenty of time to just steer into it and sit back, enjoy the ride, really.
The look of the Challenger, combined with a 0 to 60 mile an hour time of under 3.5 seconds and a top speed of 203 miles an hour, means it would be easy to dismiss this car as just a straight line machine. But to see it purely as that would be as myopic as saying the most important colour on the car was blue. This is an absolute hoot on a twisty road, and even more pleasingly, it's actually a hoot at relatively low speeds, thanks to that sound and how easily all that torque can overwhelm the traction.
It's a hooligan, but not to the extent that you have to be an absolute hero to drive it.